from in this currency. You set me up as a potential supplier taking it, and my sort of initial mental reaction was, I'm swapping this into dollars right away. So I'd like to know a bit more about where the confidence in this currency comes from, especially as does it just end up becoming another sort of plaything of speculators in the end?
The same question he has, yeah.
Well, I found it fascinating. It's the kind of thing one doesn't think about every day, to put it mildly. I'm not sure that, to compare, if you really can compare the inputs into an electrical network or a biological network with that into a financial economic network. But regardless of that, the questions I have are kind of practical. How much of the business in Brazil and Uruguay actually is done this way now? And two, you would obviously encounter a tremendous amount of political resistance to a change like this. I mean, do you think that we'd have to have another, well, obviously you think the crisis isn't over, do you think that would have to happen before we could even have a chance of getting something like this?
Well, I'll keep it as brief as possible, but I realize there's a lot of questions. But
all right, I'm going to try to veer. Arbitrage. The veer is cooperative. Okay? It's cooperative between 75,000 businesses. You need to be accepted to get in. Your hedge fund, 0 chance of getting in. Number 2, it's not convertible into Swiss francs. If you have a debt in veer, you have to compensate for it in veer. Okay? So the two systems are in equal value. The standard of value is the same, but they are not convertible into each other. And if you do convert it illegally, you're expulsed from the system, which is the worst punishment that the people have. Okay? So that's the answer to that. So no arbitrage. Okay? Cuba, no. Cuba basically does two things. It has dollars and it has national currency. Well, that is not two systems. They're two identical systems. They're two nephews of each other. They're banged that money in both cases. So it's not a parallel. Uruguay is a parallel. Okay? So, which I'll get back to when I address the next question. Would the complementary currency save the system from a crash? No. I haven't said that. It would avoid to have the same effect that a banking system has on the rest of the economy. Okay? That would be the difference. I'm not claiming that it would solve the stability of the existing system. They could be still as stupid and do what they do now. That's fine, and it would have the same results. Okay? But you have another wheel. It's like an idea of a spare wheel is a stupid idea in a car, except if you have a flat on a Friday evening on a highway, right? Then it suddenly makes a lot of sense to transport that boring thing which is not very efficient. That's what it is. It doesn't save you from having crashes, but it makes a difference when you do have one. Okay? And Richard's comments, you say it's a comparison with an ecological network. I'm sorry, it's not a comparison. It is the same network process. Just as what we talked about before with the electricity networks crashing, blackouts, is the network structure that actually creates the crash. It is an emerging property from the network, okay? Whether it's stable or not. So it's not a parallel, it's not a metaphor, it's not a comparison. It is a demonstrable, quantifiable equivalence. Unless you tell me that the economy is somehow not a network, which is hard to prove. I mean, definitely what happens in an economy is money circulating. GNP is the sum of all the circulations. Okay? So that's that part. How much business is done in Uruguay and Brazil? In the case of Brazil, they have decided to introduce this system on a local economy level. Okay? So they have not doing it on a national level. They are now implementing 150...
But it's underway already.
Yeah, they're in the way. Okay. They are currently 24. There used to be, until about a year ago, one pilot study that's been going on for 10 years in Fortaleza, in the northeastern Brazil, called the Palma Bank, okay, which is in a favela. Okay? Now they're generalizing it to 150 local dual currency banks. So the issue here is not the volume. The issue in the case of the Palma, it has proven to create 3,200 jobs in which no jobs were ever created before. Okay? That's the difference. Okay? So that's the Brazilian case. In Uruguay, the process is being implemented as we speak on the national level. It becomes operational in October, this month, on the national level. There have been pilot things, and everybody is participating, including electricity, water, all the public utilities, plus the tax authorities. And it's done completely electronically. So I would be able to answer your question probably in 2 or 3 years' time.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to give one more word to the last final comment today of the speaker on stage before we go to Baltimore to speak to the cartoonist of The Economist, Jean Pisany-Ferry.
Actually, 2 words. One is that the system you're describing already exists on a world scale. That's Asia vis-a-vis the US and Europe. Asia has very little exposure, financial exposure, to the toxic products. So essentially, Asia suffers through trade, which indicates that you can be isolated financially through your parallel currency. You still suffer a lot through trade. And just assume now that Asia would have lost the foreign exchange reserves. China would have lost $2 trillion because you would have let the rest go bust. It would have been much more significant. So I don't think that this isolation works. I think the goal should not be isolation. The goal should be stability.
Who's talking about isolation? I'm sorry.
But that's
none of the 75,000 businesses in Switzerland are isolated.
No, but that's
they're dealing with everybody else in the economy. They have a dual currency. That's all.
Yeah, but
that's not an isolation.
But that does not protect them.
It protects them more than not having it there. That's all.
Yes, but more that. But if you have a major source of instability in the system, you want to address this major source of instability instead of saying you can be in part isolated because you trade among yourself in a different currency.
Yes.
Second point. Very quickly, this trade-off between stability or resilience and efficiency is major. It's one of the key issues down the road, key policy choices. We're raising capital requirements. There are a number of things that we can do, that can be done, that result in increasing the cost of capital, with consequences for growth, with consequences for efficiency, and some positive effect on stability. And this trade-off has to be addressed explicitly, because that's the core choice. Do we want to protect ourselves for whatever crisis that can occur in the next 50 years, but at what price?
Okay, I want to leave it at that. I'm sure it's not going to be the last word in this discussion. I think it's fascinating to hear about this concept of a complementary currency. I want to thank you as well for commenting on this. A big round of applause for the 2 speakers.